Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Tuesday, and it's dark, and it's raining, and it's miserably oppressive. uh, and I thought I would do a Tuesday Reads. Now, we did a whole week of this travesty a little while ago, and I was amazed at the kinds of emails and text messages that I got from a lot of you, saying that it was exhausting to get a little glimpse of what my actual reading life is like. Uh, a few people used the word exhausting, saying that you weren't kidding. It really is just book after book after book after book after book. One person wrote, she said, I thought at first that it would be thrilling to finally see what you're actually reading in the order you're reading it and what you think about all of them. But after she said that after I think 3 days I had exceeded her reading count for most of this year, and then it just felt exhausting. And I don't know whether or not to continue that. It was a lot of fun to do. It certainly made reading when you read all the time, it can feel a little bit isolating. I mean, that's a big part of what drove me to BookTube in the first place, was all these people talking about books, and people that some of whom I could reach out and get to know. That is wonderful. That was a counterbalance to the active reading conversation part of my life that happens with other critics, where I can talk to people about books that aren't out yet. But in both cases, I am hampered a bit by my freakish reading speed. And that can sometimes feel a little bit isolating. And during that week, when we were just running down books every day, it felt kind of good in a way that I suspect. So I'm not proposing to do that all the time. But nevertheless, I thought I would go through a bunch of books here. We'll call it Tuesday Reads, but it's really I want to go over a handful of books that I have recently read. In this case, entirely reread. They're all rereads. And then go over a handful of books that are coming up, that will, whether it's today or today and tomorrow or today and Thursday or whatever, this week is going to cover these books and probably a few more, because, I'm reading overtime in anticipation of the end of the year. So let's go through. We'll go through the 4 books that I've just recently reread. They're all paperback releases, so I imagine they're out today or next Tuesday. They're current paperback releases. I don't know that they have pub sheets, so I might not be able to give you dates on them. The first one is by Justin Spring, and it's The Gourmand's Way: 6 Americans in Paris and the Birth of a New Gastronomy. Look at that fantastic cover. One more bite? It's a wafer thin. This is a collective biography. Well, here, let me read you about it. I loved it. Absolutely loved it when I first read it. And I reread it when I got the paperback and loved it even more. It's so good. And I'm not even, as you may have intuited, a foodie. Not of any kind. But let's see here. During the 30-year boom in France following World War II, Paris was not only the world's most stylish tourist destination, it was also the world capital of gastronomic genius. In The Gourmand's Way, Justin Spring tells the story of 6 American writer-adventurers having the time of their lives in the City of Light during this period and transforming the way Americans talk and think about food and the way they eat. The 6 are Julia Child, MFK Fisher, Alexis Lachine, A.J. Liebling, Richard Olney, and Alice B. Toklas. Spring focuses on the mostly joyful, exciting, formative, and dramatic moments of their lives, many of which were closely connected to the discovery of fine French food and drink. Intimate, anecdotal, and beautifully researched, The Gourmand's Way is an eye-opening exploration of the rich, storied annals of mid-20th century Franco-Italian culinary history. And that last line might make this sound fairly cloistered, fairly narrow. It might make it sound, in other words, like you have to be interested in the culinary arts to read and enjoy this book, and I am not in the least bit interested in the culinary arts. I have been known. That's a handful. There's a tiny handful of you who are watching. You don't always watch every video. There's a tiny handful of you who are watching who've actually seen me. I have been known to eat snack food that I find on the ground while walking my dog. Still perfectly good. I have even been... Never mind. I don't want to gross out the cheap seats. I am not a gourmand, is what I'm saying. And I am not a devotee of the culinary arts. And I absolutely loved this book. Absolutely loved it. I've read everything by Liebling. I've read everything by the great M.F.K. Fisher. And I've not only read everything by the great Julia Child, but I was fortunate enough to know her and correspond with her. I was her bookseller. I made book recommendations to her for a good brace of years at the end of her life, and was utterly delighted to do so. So I always go into writing about her a little bit leery, because she's easy to get wrong. And when it's someone you knew, you get prickly about that. And this is just beautifully done. Every single profile here is beautifully done and affectionately done as well, but without being inaccurate. Like, for instance, the bit on Alice B. Toklas. I came out of that profile still thinking that I wouldn't have wanted to spend more than about 3.5 minutes anywhere near her, but I still felt more well disposed towards her than I ever had before in any other writings about her. So, again, I know that modern paperbacks aren't cheap. What is this? This is $17, but I do recommend it. I do recommend it, and not just for foodies. Although, I guess if we're gearing up for the holiday season, if you know someone who loves food and doesn't get to bookstores, so in other words, they might not have seen this. This is new in paperback. They're going to love it. They're absolutely going to love it. So I recommend it for that. Then this next one it's very different in tone and register. I really liked it, and I recently reread it. Picked up a lot more. It's a lot better researched. It's a lot more finer grained than I had thought. I guess I was going into it the first time mainly for the story, the overall story. This is by Lindsay Fitzharris, and it is The Butchering Art in paperback. I think this comes out probably today or next week. The subtitle is Joseph Lister's Quest to Transform the Grisly World of Victorian Medicine. And we have the famous painting on the cover that illustrates a bit of that grisly world. Let me read you a little bit about this as well. In The Butchering Art, Lindsay Fitzharris reveals the shocking world of 19th century surgery on the eve of profound transformation. As surgeons put on their blood-streaked aprons and aligned their instruments, hundreds of men would crowd into the dirty operating theater, ready to be enthralled by the spectacle. In a time before anesthesia, surgeons were lauded for their speed and brute strength. Surgery was a show. But no matter how quickly the operation, the mortality rate for patients was just as high as ever. Surgeons were baffled by the mysterious ailments that claimed the lives of their patients, until an unlikely figure stepped forward. Young, melancholy Quaker surgeon named Joseph Lister, who would solve the deadly riddle and change the course of history. Fitzharris dramatically reconstruct Lister's career path in gripping detail, culminating in his audacious claim that germs were the source of all infection, and could be countered by antiseptics. The first time I read this, I was mostly concerned with the butchering part, and the second time when I went through, I noticed a lot more of the art part, if that isn't too facile a way to put it. The butchering part can't help but take center stage, because that description was correct. If you have a patient whose arm needs to come off at the elbow, and you know that, then your job is to get it off as fast as possible, because the longer you wait, the longer it takes, the higher the chances that the patient will die of either shock or exsanguination. So there was a huge amount of spectacle involved, and I concentrated on that the first time that I read this and really liked it. But the second time, there's a lot more here than I got the first time, so I was happy to reread it. And once again, it is a recommendation. I can recommend it, but oh my God, you're going to have to be sure of the recipient, because this author pulls no punches when it comes to what that world was like. It's no coincidence that so many people who kept journals and diaries, if they ever had to have any kind of surgery and managed to survive it, if it was successful, they remembered it forever. From 2 centuries before here, Samuel Pepys, for instance, is perfect. Is probably one of the most famous literary examples where he was cut for the stone. He was cut for a kidney stone in the open air in the butcher's market, and survived. And ever afterwards, on the anniversary of that day, he had a party. because he knew perfectly well, most people knew perfectly well that their chances of surviving were slim. And this book gets into why. It's the portrait of Lister in here is really, really good. It's more fine-grained than I thought the first time around. So I do recommend this, especially if you're interested, if you know somebody who's interested in medicine. Like, for instance, this thing should be given to every medical and pre-med student in the world. Make them find the time from their class-related reading to read this. Make them do it. It might make them, I mean, it won't. There's a chance. It might make them a tiny bit less arrogant once they get a job. It's not much can counter the inculcation of the medical arts that is designed to make its practitioners think of themselves as gods when they get out the other end. That's a whole institution that's designed to be that way. And that can be a little off-putting, considering how many med school essays I wrote to get their otherwise corn-fed and borderline illiterate candidates into school where I knew they would make great doctors, and they went on to do so, considering how many of those young men subsequently corrected me when I addressed, back in the days of snail mail, when I would address a letter to them and they would write back and say, oh, and by the way, no big deal, but I'd like it if you put Dr. so-and-so on your letters. I've lost count of how many of those young men ended up doing that once they went through the process of considering themselves better than mere mortals. and I always took the occasion to point out that, you know, I'm not making you call me doctor, so let's keep this normal, okay? I'm not going to use an honorific on you when I've cleaned your own, you know, beer-smelling vomit off you on many an occasions. But anyway, the Lister is an antidote to that, and this book is an antidote to that. So if you know a med school student who is in any way a reader, oh my God, this is a perfect match for them. I'm not sure how many other kinds of people it would be a perfect match for, but these next two, I believe they're new in paperback. In fact, I think with these I might actually have paperwork. Yes, I do. I have paperwork. Do I have anything here to tell me when these come out in paperback? Okay. All right. Hang on just a second here. Sorry, I hate dead air like this. I try. This channel is so unprofessional as it is that I try to avoid this kind of thing. Do we have anything here? All right. That's you. What about? No. All right. I don't. Okay. 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 So I don't have dates on any of these things. Except for the one that I don't have. So, anyway, this is Cassandra Clare, who is a name that will surely need no introduction here on BookTube. And this is her Dark Artifices series. The third one in that series is, let me see if I can get you, I've got so much paperwork here. It's like, the third one in that series is this one. It comes out in early December, and it is Queen of Air and Darkness. Let me show, that's the cover. Queen of Air and Darkness. And in preparation for that, I got the first two Dark Artifice books in these lovely trade paperbacks. These absolutely beautiful trade paperbacks. They have sequential artwork on the spines. And they have these are the covers. There's Lady Midnight, and there's Lord of Shadows. So I got these two. These two Shadowhunter books in trade paperbacks, and I took the occasion to reread them just on their own, without immersing myself in you know all of the stuff that comes before them, and I was reassured in my opinion that this author just gets better and better. Her first book. The first one of these, look at how many there have been now. Oh my God. This is a sprawling fantasy world that she has been novel by novel creating of the supernatural worlds and beings and turf wars that exist unseen right alongside the normal mortal world. And that world is patrolled and largely overseen by shadow hunters who are half Nephilim and feared and disliked and distrusted by most of those other supernatural creatures. And they've been huge. Those of you who know Cassandra Clare's works, it started with City of Bones, which has a new cover. These are too small for me to show you. I was struck by the original cover, which was a topless teenage boy seen from chin to navel. I was struck enough to borrow it from the bookstore where I worked and to read it. And I was struck right away that, wow, this is a YA novel. This was before she became an industry. This is before it became hugely successful. I was always on the lookout for YA fantasy that most especially I could hand to boys. I mean, girls, I knew from that bookstore and many other bookstores and a lifetime of suggesting books for people to read. Girls are better and more adventurous readers. They don't need much coaxing. Whereas boys tend to, especially once they start to hit their teens, then you lose them if you don't help them out a bit. And so I was always on the lookout for YA books that, in addition to being all-purpose recommendations that I could do, that were good recommendations for boys. And City of Bones it just starts at 70 miles an hour and never slows down and is really well done. And the thing I've noticed as I've read the huge arcs, let me describe the arcs here, although all of you will know this. The City of Bones was the first in the Mortal Instruments series, which went on for 6 books. And then there was the Infernal Devices, the Clockwork Angel, Clockwork Prince, and Clockwork Princess, where the middle book, Clockwork Prince, was superb. Just superb. There were emotional kidney punches in the Clockwork Prince that I still remember vividly. They were so well orchestrated. And now the Dark Artifices is Lady Midnight and Lord of Shadows, and then the next one is Queen of Air and Darkness. So when I got these two lovely trade paperbacks, I reread them. And boy, oh boy, do they hold up. They are so good. The Lady Midnight especially. I mean, Lord of Shadows I really liked, but I thought it maundered just a bit. But Lady Midnight is just, you wouldn't think so because it's fairly chunky, but it is so taut. And the two main characters, the main Shadowhunter young woman that we know has murdered parents. And when murder victims start showing up in the Los Angeles underworld that bear the same sigils that were on the corpses of her parents, she has to get involved. But you would think, I mean, it's so in one way it's a supernatural buddy murder mystery because she has a partner. She has a boyfriend, but she also has a partner. She has the Shadowhunters are bonded with their parabatai, their lifelong warrior buddies. It's a strange way to put it. You have to sort of get into this world, and then when you do, all of it starts to make more and more sense. It's amazing to me how much of a continuity wonk Cassandra Clare is for her own work. Just amazing to me. I picture that her writer's room, her office in her home, that you might think of it as this cozy thing with books piled everywhere, a nice cushion that's all battered and a window that overlooks a park. I picture that she has one of those rooms that she shows to guests, but that her real workroom is downstairs in the basement, and that every wall is a whiteboard with lines connecting pictures and character names and everything, because it's unbelievably complex at this point. Off-puttingly so, in a way, although when I was rereading these two, especially Lady Midnight, I was thinking, okay, when you're rereading this, read it as someone who doesn't know anything. How good a job does Cassandra Clare do in bringing a total new reader up to speed if they see that this is book 1 of a series? Yes, it's embedded in the Shadowhunters' larger world, but this is book 1 of one series. What would a newcomer think? Would they get it? And boy, oh boy, would they. I was totally impressed. Far more than when you're reading these things, just in the swim of things as they come along, you're all caught up in the excitement. I was impressed far more this time around at what complete works these are. You could easily pick up this book as an introduction to the Shadowhunters world without guessing that there was half a dozen books before it. And that's impressive. Also, I really liked, believe it or not, again, because this is a really long novel, and so is this one, I really like the tautness of the storytelling. There really is precious little in the way of fat. A little more in this one than in Lady Midnight, but really, it's amazing how the story just flies along. The only the only down points, I wonder if I marked the pages. No, probably it happens too often that I didn't. There is a forbidden love in these stories. The Parabatai are forbidden to be lovers. They are forbidden to fall in love with each other. They can be everything else to each other. Best friends, medics in the field, always have your back with a weapon in a fight, but they can't love each other. So there's a forbidden love in these books, and that's great. That works really well right alongside the murder mystery, but it leads this author to her one indulgence, her one real indulgence in these books. I'd forgotten it when I reread these. I remembered it. I'm willing to give her a lot because the Shadowhunter books are so enjoyable that I'm willing to forgive her a lot, but how to put it for a family-friendly audience? When her characters succumb to the grips of passion, the prose, I won't even insult the color spectrum by saying that the prose turns purple. I don't even know the color of what it turns. But it turns, whatever the name of the color it turns a color that makes purple seem modest. Not in terms of scandal or really open eroticism, but just the breathlessness. Oh my God, those passages have, for me, become kind of funny. In a way, they have become kind of funny. But the rest of it, oh boy. So, again, recommendations, only unlike the first two here. The Shadowhunter books don't need me to recommend them, especially not on BookTube. Nevertheless, it was a delight to read them. And, as far as I know, I have not received a copy of Queen of Air and Darkness. And that's got me bugged. So I'm going to be having a stiff word with this publicist, see if maybe we can correct that. Maybe I want to make sure at least I'm on the list for the finished copy. But anyway, those were the books that I've recently read that I want to recommend. They're all recommends. Now I want to go through some that I haven't read yet, but that are right on my docket for this week. First one is something you might have seen around BookTube. It's The Western Wind by Samantha Harvey, who has been saddled with one of her enthusiastic UK blurbers, with a blurb that if I were an author, I would pay the blurber not to say it. She's been called Our Generation's Virginia Woolf. That is deadly. That is absolutely deadly. Why would any blurber think that was a good idea to say? But this, I'm sure it's going to be a buddy read with Sean and Curtis. I can't get rid of them. I mean, I love the way we're always voxing with each other, but still. But this is a medieval murder mystery set in 1491. In the small village of Oakham, its wealthiest and most industrious resident, Tom Newman, is swept away by the river during the early hours of Shrove Saturday. Was it murder, suicide, or an accident? Narrated from the perspective of the local priest John Reeve, patient shepherd to his wayward flock, a shadowy portrait of a community comes to light through its residents' tortured revelations. As some of their darkest secrets are revealed, the intrigue of unexplained death ripples through the congregation. But will Reeve, a man with secrets of his own, uncover what happened to Newman, and what will happen if he can't? And I have heard all about this. I haven't dipped into it yet. I'm told that it has all sorts of narrative and time hijinks that it gets up to in the course of it. We shall see. I'm up for it anyway. And then this next one is a Library of America volume. You've seen sometimes they do thematic presentations. They're famous for their reprints, and they have. I wonder if I have it here. Yeah, they have a beautiful reprint that's coming up on Revolutionary War historical fiction by James Fenimore Cooper, and that's what they tend to look like. They tend to look just like that. They're black spine reprint volumes, really good, really well curated. Editions of these great reprint works. They've done a huge amount of Cooper. But sometimes they do thematic collections that aren't that are just collections ranging over time. And I tend to love them. Their volume on sea writing is not to be missed. Their volume on sea writing really, really deserves you to go and find if you're interested in sea writing. And they have an upcoming volume on writings about Los Angeles. I'm not sure if that's out yet or not, but that was tremendous. And this is another one. This is edited by Mindy Aloff, which those of you who know that name will know immediately what it's going to be about. This is Dance in America, a new Library of America volume about writing on dance in America with this beautiful cover. And of course, you can't, if you're going to write a book on dance in America, you have to have this couple on the cover, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And this just spans decades and decades of dance writing. And I'm looking forward to it. There'll be some writers in here that I haven't read before. So I've read. There was a huge anthology of dance writing about 15 years ago, something like that. And I worked my way through that book. It was twice this size. And there was a lot that I didn't get. There were the editors of that volume. If I remember what it is, I'll link it down below. But the editors of that volume, I think, were a little too far gone in the world of dance to really think about whether or not their selections were made for people like me. if I am not culinary, I am also not a dancer. And I'm hoping that maybe this is a little bit lighter touch, a little more general touch. We shall see. This next one is a translation from, I think, the Russian, although I think the authors are Ukrainian. This was a literary sensation everywhere else, and now exists in English. This is translated by Julia Matov-Hershey, and it is by Marina and Sergei Dyachenko, and it's Vita Nostra. The gorgeous American cover. Very rare that I say that. But this is a fantasy novel of some kind. While vacationing at a beach with her mother, Sasha Samokina meets the mysterious Farit Kozanikov, I ask you. Under the most peculiar circumstances, the teenage girl is powerless to refuse when this strange and unusual man with an air of sinister directs her to perform a task with potentially scandalous consequences. He rewards her efforts with a strange golden coin. And this is called the definitive English-language translation of the internationally best-selling Russian novel, a brilliant dark fantasy combining psychological suspense and enchantment. And the pub sheet mentions, why am I thinking Ukrainian? Maybe I'm confusing this with something else. I thought sure. Yeah, this is it introduces the definitive English language translation. It's an immersive fantastica from acclaimed Ukrainian authors, and is an allegorical tale of personal, philosophical, and magical and metaphysical transformation. And there was a blurb here that I really liked. What was it? Yeah, from Booklist. There's a blurb from Booklist. Dark and foreboding, this fantasy translated from Russian is more a philosophical treatise on growing up and the nature of reality than an adventure tale. Readers willing to challenge themselves and slowly digest this deep book will enjoy it immensely. And this comes out, I think, this month. Yeah, this comes out next week. And I don't think I ever got an advance copy for it, or maybe I did and forgot about it. But I'm curious to know. I mean, obviously, as you can tell from this little Tuesday Reads, or whatever we're going to call it, I am making the exception here and there for fiction during nonfiction November. My reading, I'm just trusting that I don't really need to think about it. My reading will be far more nonfiction than fiction anyway. But nevertheless, the last two things we're going to do here are also fiction. This one is one that I got an advance copy of and scoffed right away. I scorned it. I scowled at it when I looked at it on the shelf as I was passing it. And it occurred to me when I got the finished copy that is not fair. That no matter what kind of a travesty it seems, I must read the book. I can only judge the book by the book. So I'm going to do it. This is Ben Schott. This is Jeeves and the King of Clubs. This is the finished copy of a Jeeves and Wooster pastiche novel. And I've mentioned on this channel before the weird, uneven reactions that I have to pastiche novels. Some of them I'm okay with in the extreme. Give me all the Sherlock Holmes pastiches in the world. Something about Jeeves and Wooster, something about these stories just makes it feel like this is a trespass rather than a tribute. And we'll see. I could be wrong. I don't know anything about this author, so let's see here. The misadventures of Bertie Wooster and his incomparable personal gentleman, Jeeves, have delighted audiences for nearly a century. Now, best-selling author Ben Schott brings this odd couple back to life in a madcap new adventure full of entanglements, imbroglios, and Woodhouseian wordplay that readers have adored for generations. In the latest uproarious adventure, the Junior Ganymede Club, an association of English finers, butlers, and valets, is revealed to be an elite arm of the British Secret Service. Jeeves must ferret out a fascist spy embedded in the highest social circles, and only his hapless employer, Bertie, can help. Unfolding in the background are school chum capers, affairs of the heart, antics with aunts, and sartorial set-tos. And that worries me. Every Jeeves and Wooster pastiche book that I have read, I have hated. Not only because they don't hold a candle to the original, but also because they are aware that they are Jeeves and Wooster pastiche novels, which also drives me crazy. That is poor pastiche fiction. Pastiche fiction has to have not only all of the benchmarks and the familiar knobs and whistles, it also has to think that it's not pastiche fiction. It has to just go ahead with a completely clear heart. And it can't be, if it's looking over its shoulder at you, the reader, and saying, aren't I clever pastiche fiction, that ruins everything. That breaks the spell. So we'll see. I'll give this a try. If it's a Jeeves and Wooster pastiche book that I actually end up liking, it will be the first of its kind. And I'm figuring that even if I hate it, it will at least have the positive effect of sending me back to, Blanding's Castle or something to cleanse the palate. It will almost, even if I hate it, it will almost certainly make me read some Jeeves and Wooster or some Woodhouse of some kind, and that's always good. So it might have a silver lining, even if it's terrible. And then the last one is a kid's book. I'll be reading this right away. I'll read this today. It won't take any time at all. This is by Rachel Cole with illustrations by Melissa Crowton, and it is Mousy, I Will Read to You. And it's the story of a parent mouse who reads to baby, and then to toddler, and then to young adult mouse, and there was a picture that I glanced when I was going through this. This is going to be a chronology, taking a young reader through crying at night, through saying first words, through wanting one particular book 80 times. And there was one scene I noticed when baby is old enough to take books out of the library himself. And I imagine it goes on from there. I'll let you know. I don't think I've ever read any kids book by these two, but a kids book about reading, those tend to have a dear place in my heart. I didn't have the tremendous luck that most of you did to start reading that early, or to fall in love with it that early. And I can imagine what books like this must be for kids like that, especially a kid who's old enough to know the words, old enough to know the concepts, but not yet old enough to read. A book like this would make them think there is a magic kingdom waiting for me. And there is. That's the thing that all of us, regardless of what we like to read or hate to read, regardless of whether or not we disagree with each other today on anything, all of us would turn to that kid and say, there is a magic kingdom right around the corner. You're about to be able to enter it. You should be eager. You absolutely should be eager. We can all agree on that. We would all tell that kid the same thing. So I'm looking forward to this book. So we shall see. So there you have it. A hideously long video. This is kind of a Tuesday Reads. We'll have to come up with, what is this? Is this Am Reading? Does hashtag Am Reading cover BookTube videos? And if it does it cover like the first half of this video, which is all about stuff I just read, not currently reading? What is it that these videos are? I'm happy to do them, but I want to know what we should call it. Because this is not a Tuesday Reads. I'll figure out something. Or, bombard me with suggestions. Or let me know if this actually is something that exists on BookTube that maybe I don't know about. I've asked some people, and those people have been, they've poked fun at me, and they've been less than helpful. And a few of them have said, well, there isn't anything specifically like what you're looking for, because when it comes to how much reading a person gets done in 1, 2, or 3 day period, there isn't anyone else on BookTube quite like you. You're a freak. You smell. So maybe there isn't anything. One way or another. These are the books that are on my horizon right now. So it's Mousy, I Will Read to You. It's Jeeves and the King of Clubs. It's Vita Nostra. Translation from the Russian by 2 Ukrainian authors. It's Dance in America. Dance writing, spanning decades. It's The Western Wind by Samantha Harvey, who I've heard is our generation's Virginia Woolf. Then Lady Midnight and Lord of Shadows in the Dark Artifices series. Preparatory, I suppose, to the arrival of the new book. And then The Butchering Art in paperback, and The Gourmand's Way, also in paperback. So that's a pile of books that I either have just recently read, or will be reading today, tonight, tomorrow. So whatever that is, that's what we've just gone through. So I'll wrap this up because it's gone way too long, and I'll list all these books below if I remember to do it. And I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.